One of the things I learned the hard way was that it doesn't pay to get discouraged. Keeping busy and making optimism a way of life can restore your faith in yourself. Lucille Ball. There are stages in life that make a person feel as if they are being submerged at the bottom of the ocean. Everything loses direction, every effort seems meaningless, and the mind begins to become the most dangerous enemy. When discouragement appears, it doesn't strike like a violent storm. It arrives slowly, like a cold mist weaving through every crack in the door. Initially, it's just a few negative thoughts, a few days of lost motivation, a few times wanting to give up earlier than usual. But if left to linger too long, despondency will erode the will just as seawater erodes rock. At that point, people no longer lose because of their circumstances, but because they have lost the belief that they can stand up again. The act of keeping busy is not merely about filling time. It is a strategy for mental survival. A mind without a goal often becomes fertile ground for anxiety and despair to grow. When people stop moving, painful memories and negative voices begin to echo louder in their heads. But when you continue to act even through the smallest of steps, you are sending yourself a powerful message. I'm not finished yet. Just as an old machine left idle for too long will gradually rust, the human soul needs movement to keep itself from collapsing. Self-belief rarely returns through thought alone. It is rebuilt through actions repeated every single day. A morning where you wake up on time. A task you complete even when the interest is gone. A time you pull yourself out of the bed of despair. These things seem small, but they are like bricks, silently rebuilding the bridge connecting a person to their own value. True self-confidence does not come from flowery affirmations. It comes from the evidence that you continue to walk after everything. And then optimism, when turned into a lifestyle, is no longer a fleeting emotion. It becomes a way of facing life. Not a naive kind of optimism that denies all hardship, but a mature light born after having seen the darkness. It is when you understand that life may not be fair, but there are still things worth hoping for. It is when you fall down and no longer ask, why me? But start to ask, what will I learn from this? There are those who let suffering turn them bitter. But there are also those who transform suffering into depth, into strength, and into a very difficult to shake calm. They are like trees once bent by storms, whose roots grew deeper into the earth because of it. And what makes them strong is not that life was gentler to them, but that they learned not to let adversity decide their self-worth. Ultimately, a person does not regain faith in themselves in a single miraculous moment. It returns bit by bit through the days of continued effort, through the times of not allowing oneself to fully collapse, and through the choice to hold on to optimism like keeping a small flame in the middle of a long, cold winter. That flame, however fragile, is enough to lead a person back to themselves. Challenges, failures, defeats, and ultimately progress are what make your life worthwhile. We often imagine that happiness lies in peaceful days, where everything runs smoothly like a silent machine. A life without impact gradually becomes as bland as stagnant water that no longer reflects the sky. It is failure that creates depth for the soul. A person who has never fallen will never understand the weight of standing up. Pain is not just an injury, it is a process of restructuring the self. Each time one is rejected, betrayed, or defeated, they are like a bar of iron thrown into a glowing red furnace. The fire was not created to destroy the iron, but to make it tougher. The most terrifying thing is not failure, but living a whole life in a state of never having dared to try. Because failure at least proves that you stepped forward, while excessive safety is often just a cage wrapped in soft velvet. Many look at emotional wounds as signs of weakness, but in truth, they are like the rings on an ancient tree. The more storms pass through, the thicker the trunk becomes, and the deeper the roots cling to the earth. A person matures not when they win at everything, but when they learn how to carry their pain and still keep walking. The quietest strength, not loud, not showy, but enough to support one through even the darkest seasons of life. Progress never appears within the comfort zone. An eagle does not learn to fly in a cozy nest. It only truly knows how strong its wings are when forced to dive off a cliff. Human beings are the same. Challenges are like the invisible hand of fate. constantly pulling us out of an old version of ourselves. There are days you feel shattered, but sometimes that is the moment a naive ego is being stripped away to make room for a stronger essence to be born. Do not curse the failures that once made you cry. It was they that silently built the depth in your gaze, the calm in your soul, and the courage in your heart. A worthwhile life is not one without pain, but one that has walked through pain while still holding the desire to move forward. What makes a human being most beautiful is not that they have never been broken, but that after all those breakages, they still choose to grow. Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There are those who enter life with a burning heart, carrying a desire to change the world like a storm, wanting to tear apart an old sky. But they quickly realize a bitter truth. Being right does not mean being heard, and being strong does not mean others will follow you. People often think that change must be created with the loudest shout, with the most intense anger. But aggression only makes the defensive instincts of others build invisible walls. An idea, no matter how right, will die prematurely if it is transmitted through contempt. The human psyche does not open under pressure. It opens through the feeling of being understood. Like fire, if you thrust it into others, they will only feel the burn and retreat. But if you keep it close enough to warm them, they will come forward voluntarily. That is why the people who truly create change are rarely just the loudest ones. They are like those who sow seeds in silence. They know that to move a soul, one must first enter that person's inner world. A true leader does not pull others along with chains of power, but with the feeling that we are doing this together. That connection is stronger than any command, for people can resist imposition, but it is hard to resist the feeling of belonging to something greater than themselves. Everyone wants to feel valued. Therefore, when you fight for what you believe in, how you treat others is as important as what you are protecting. If you make them feel looked down upon, they will close their hearts. But if you make them feel their voice is respected, they will begin to see the world through your eyes. It's not about winning an argument, but about awakening the dormant empathy in others. A river does not break a mountain with the force of a single impact. It flows patiently, day after day, soft yet persistent, until the rocks must clear a path. Human beings are the same. Long-lasting changes are rarely created by momentary rage. They are born of patience, kindness, and the ability to inspire. When you know how to turn your struggle into a fire that others want to help keep alive, you are no longer alone. And that is the moment a personal belief becomes a power strong enough to shake an entire era. Extraordinary things are always hiding in places people never think to look. Jodi Picoult. Humans often live by a strange instinct to seek the extraordinary in the brightest places. They look up at high peaks, at cities brilliant with lights, at people hailed in crowds, believing that great value only exists there. But life likes to hide miracles in the shadows that no one bothers to look at. The deepest beauty of life often lies outside the scope of noisy attention. It is not where everyone crowds to look, but in the forgotten zones of silence. We are drawn to glamour because the brain loves clear signals of success and power. We are attracted to things that are recognized, like moths drawn to a light, not realizing that the darkness is where the secrets are kept. Because of this, many people go through life without realizing that what could change them lies in seemingly mundane moments. A brief conversation, a silent failure, an ordinary person they once accidentally passed by. The extraordinary rarely enters life with a loud noise. It often appears like a small seed lying under cold soil, silently waiting for the day to sprout. There are diamonds lying deep beneath the dark earth for millions of years before they see the light. Human beings are the same. Many great souls were once looked down upon simply because they did not shine in the way the world expected. An idea that can change an era is sometimes born in a cramped room, in solitude and doubt. A person who can heal your heart might appear on the exact day you think life has nothing left to hope for. The strange thing is that the most important moments often do not look important when they happen. They are as quiet as a raindrop falling on a lake, but their ripples can spread throughout a lifetime. The greatest tragedy of man is not that they do not find the extraordinary, but that they lose the ability to recognize it. When the mind is too accustomed to chasing things labeled with value, we gradually become blind to the beauty of simple things. A flower growing between rocks, a person still gentle after hundreds of wounds, a small dream that no one ever believed in. Sometimes these are the things with the greatest power. For the extraordinary is not defined by size or fame. It is defined by its ability to touch the deepest parts of the human soul. Learn to look at life with slower eyes. Don't just fixate on looking for light where the crowd is heading. Perhaps the true treasure of your life lies on a detour, an old failure, or a place no one has ever thought of. And perhaps the most extraordinary thing the world is overlooking is you in a version that has not yet been fully explored. Happiness is not by chance, but by choice. Jim Rohn. Humans often treat happiness as if it were a random gift from fate. They look at others' lives and think that some are born with gentler sunlight, better luck, or doors that automatically open before them. And from there, they silently believe that happiness is something that only comes to those favored by life. We wait until we have enough money to allow ourselves to be at peace. Wait until we are loved to see our own value. Wait until everything is perfect before we start living. But life doesn't work that way. It is like an ocean always in motion, never completely calm. If one waits for the storm to vanish before learning to smile, they might spend their whole life just shivering on the shore. Happiness is not the moment life becomes perfect. It is the decision to still find the light even on days when the sky is covered in gray clouds. Many think choosing happiness means forcing oneself to be cheerful at all times. But that is just a thin layer of paint covering the cracks within. Real happiness is more mature than that. It is the ability to accept that life always contains loss, disappointment, and dark spaces, yet still not letting them steal the gratitude for what remains. Like a forest after a great fire, life silently sprouts from the ashes. The strongest people are not those who have never suffered, but those who learned how to nurture joy right in the middle of wreckage. The more one chases happiness as a goal to be seized, the easier it is to feel empty. For happiness does not like being hunted. It often appears when we know how to live fully in the present, knowing how to love the small things we once took for granted. A peaceful meal, the laughter of a loved one, the feeling of one's heart lightened after a tiring day. Those things don't need special luck to exist. They need a soul awake enough to recognize them. Life will always have people who are wealthy but insecure, successful but lonely, and there are also very ordinary people whose eyes are as peaceful as a lake after the rain. The difference lies not in who possesses more, but in who knows what to choose to keep in their mind. Because ultimately, happiness is not a reward given to the luckiest. No matter how chaotic the world outside, they still have the right to decide what light will be kept in their hearts. It's your attitude. If you take yourself lightly and don't take yourself too seriously, pretty soon you can find the humor in our everyday lives. And sometimes it can be a lifesaver. Betty White. Humans often carry life on their shoulders as if it were a heavy sentence that must be completed perfectly. They lock themselves in expectations, standards, and fears of being judged, then gradually lose the ability to breathe lightly amidst a life already under too much pressure. We fall once and think we are a failure. We are rejected once and think we are not good enough. But life is actually more like an improvisational stage than a perfect test. The things that keep you awake today might just be a story that makes you laugh in a few years. When people over-intellectualize or over-seriousify everything, the mind becomes a sealed room of pressure where every small mistake echoes like a hammer blow. But humor is like a window unexpectedly opening, letting light and air flood in. Some live like blocks of cold stone, rigid, controlling, and always trying to maintain a perfect image. It is precisely that way of living that makes their souls most fragile. The truly strong are often those who know how to laugh at their own clumsiness. They understand that humans are inherently imperfect, and that is not something to be ashamed of. A coffee spill on a shirt, a slip of the tongue in a crowd, a disastrously failed plan. Sometimes these are not tragedies, but just very human slips of life. When you can smile at them, you are no longer a prisoner of perfection. Humor is not merely entertainment. It is the brain's way of protecting itself from despair. Those who have walked through deep suffering often understand the value of laughter very well, not because their lives were less traumatic, but because they learned how to not let the darkness swallow them. Laughter is sometimes like a life raft in a surging emotional ocean. It doesn't erase the storm, but it helps a person not sink to the bottom. Life is full of irrationalities. We worry about the future while no one knows what tomorrow brings. We try to control everything while life always finds a way to break every plan. Attitude toward life is far more important than circumstance. A soul that knows how to relax will see relief where others only see pressure. A person who can laugh at themselves is harder for life to defeat than one who always tries to appear perfect. And perhaps becoming a better person isn't about being more solemn, but about learning to walk through storms while keeping a smile in one's eyes. For sometimes, between days that seem unbearable, a little humor, a little tenderness with oneself is exactly what silently saves a person from a total collapse. Once you replace negative thoughts with positive ones, you'll start having positive results. Willie Nelson. The way a person views the world will gradually determine how they live in that world. A mind submerged in darkness will see dead ends everywhere, while a mind that knows how to turn toward the light will always find a gap to step through, even in the darkest days. The danger of negative thinking is that it doesn't appear as a major storm right from the start. It starts with very small whispers. I'm not good enough, it will probably fail, no one really cares about me. But when those sentences are repeated long enough, they become a kind of mental prison. A person begins to believe in them as absolute truth. They do not fail for lack of ability, but because the mind made them give up before they started. A tree cannot grow if every day it is strangled by its own roots. However, positive thinking is not self-delusion that life is always beautiful. It is not a fake smile used to hide pain. True positivity is the ability to keep one's mind from being seized by darkness. It is when you fall down but still think, what can I learn from this? It is when life slams a door shut, but you are still calm enough to find another path. The positive person is not someone who has never suffered. They just differ in that they don't let suffering define their whole life. You find evidence for whatever you believe most strongly. If you always think you are useless, the mind will only focus on failures and overlook every small bit of progress. But when you start to believe you can grow, the brain gradually shifts its attention toward opportunities, solutions, and hope. Just as when the sun rises, the mist doesn't vanish immediately, but the light is enough for a person to see the road ahead clearly. Some spend their whole lives in negativity without realizing they are drinking drops of poison every day. They let painful memories, criticisms, and fears become the primary voices in their head. But there are also those who, despite having gone through loss and wreckage, still choose to keep optimism like a small flame in the middle of a cold winter. That choice makes all the difference. Not because positive thinking can turn life into a fairy tale, but because it gives a person the strength to keep fighting instead of surrendering. Each person's life often reflects the state of their mind. When the inside is full of the thorns of pessimism, it is very hard to see the flowers blooming. But when you start to change how you talk to yourself, change how you view failure, and learn to sow hope in the soul, everything around you also begins to change. For sometimes, the first thing that needs to be saved is not your circumstances, but how you are thinking about your own life. A #2 pencil and a dream can take you anywhere. Joyce Meyer. This life often makes us believe that to go far, we need money, power, status, or rare opportunities. But the history of so many great people began with things astonishingly small: an old desk, a torn notebook, a blunt pencil, and a soul that refused to give up on its dream. The #2 pencil here is not just a school supply. It symbolizes the ordinary, the humble starting point that so many are ashamed of or look down upon. Humans tend to underestimate the small because the psyche is always attracted to the flashy. But it is precisely those simple things where every personal revolution begins. An idea once hastily written with a pencil lead can become a book that changes millions of lives. A scribbled sketch can be the beginning of a genius architect. An awkward diary entry can be the first voice of a soul learning to understand itself. What truly creates magic is not found in the pencil, but in the dream standing behind the hand holding it. A dream is a strange thing. It can make an exhausted person keep walking, making someone doubted by the whole world still silently believe in themselves. No one sees a dream with the naked eye, but it has the ability to pull a person across limits that seem impossible. Like a lighthouse in the night sea, a dream doesn't stop the waves from raging, but it gives one a reason not to let go of the oars. Many fail not for lack of ability, but because they lose faith in the value of small steps. They want success immediately, want to see results tomorrow, so they easily despair when things progress slowly. But life doesn't build great things with giant leaps. It builds them with thousands of small pencil strokes repeated every day. A pencil can write mistakes, can be sharpened down, can be erased many times, and so can a human. We mature through the times we correct ourselves, not through being perfect from the start. There is a very powerful beauty in the image of a person sitting quietly with their dream. No applause, no spotlight, only silent persistence amidst days when no one believes. But it is in those simple moments that the future is written line by line. For every great journey once began with a single first dot. And perhaps the most amazing thing about humans is, sometimes they don't need much to change their fate. Just a tool enough to start and a dream big enough to not allow themselves to stop. Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. Colin Powell. Humans often think power lies in muscle, authority, or control. But in psychological depth, true power lies in the ability not to let the spirit collapse before adversity. A person can be poor, can fail, can be pushed into life's darkest corner, but if the fire of hope still burns inside them, they have never truly lost. The terrifying part of hardship is not just the pain it brings, but how it erodes a person's faith bit by bit. Consecutive failures make many begin to doubt themselves. They look in the mirror and only see helplessness reflected in their eyes. That is when the spirit of optimism becomes a form of antibody for the soul. It does not deny the harsh reality, but it prevents the person from being submerged by that reality. Like a small candle in a dark room, that light may be weak, but as long as it exists, the darkness will never fully win. Humans are very different when nourished by hope. A pessimist often sees the wall in front of them and stops. But the optimist will look for the door or create a new path. Not because they are more naive, but because belief makes the mind more flexible, more creative, and more persistent. Optimism is like invisible fuel. Two people can start from the same point, face the same storm, but the one who keeps hope will go much further, for their spirit does not leak energy into despair. Optimism is not a privilege of those with easy lives. In fact, the most positive people are often those who have walked through the deepest darkness. They understand pain, understand loss, but they also understand that if they let their souls rot with bitterness, they will lose everything. So they choose hope, not because life is always good, but because it is the only way to continue living strongly. A tree does not grow because the sky is clear forever. It is the times it struggles against great winds that make its roots strike deeper into the earth. Persistent optimism also has a strange contagiousness. A person who maintains positivity amidst adversity is like a fire in the middle of winter, not only warming themselves but also adding strength to those around them. There are gazes calm enough to make others stop panicking. There are smiles after suffering enough to make people believe they too can overcome. That is why optimism is not an emotional weakness. It is a rare form of spiritual character. Ultimately, the strength of a human is not measured by the number of times they never fell, but by the number of times they still stood up with belief intact in their heart. Life will always have days that leave you exhausted, challenges that make you want to give up. But if you maintain an optimism persistent enough, it will amplify every capability within you, turning endurance into resilience, failure into a lesson, and turning a person who seemed ordinary into a version much stronger than they ever thought of themselves. Pessimism leads to weakness, optimism to power. William James. How we interpret life will decide how we exist in it. Two people can stand before the same storm, suffer the same losses, but the one who sees the apocalypse will gradually collapse, while the one who still sees hope will find a reason to keep walking. It is not circumstances that create strength first, but the mental attitude when facing those circumstances. Pessimism is like a black fog covering the mind. It makes a person see every door as locked tight before they even try to open it. The pessimist often fails not for lack of ability, but because they have surrendered from within their thoughts. Their mind constantly repeats invisible phrases. It's no use. I will just lose again. Life is inherently not on my side. And then the terrifying thing happens. The body begins to listen to the mind. Energy decreases, will tires, actions become slow. A person carrying a pessimistic mindset long-term is like a warrior stepping onto the battlefield who has already stripped off their armor before the battle begins. Conversely, optimism is not a rose-colored illusion that everything will be easy. True optimism is a form of spiritual courage. It is the ability to look directly at harsh reality yet still believe one can find a way through it. The optimist is not blind to suffering. They just refuse to let suffering become the master of their life. Like a lighthouse in the night sea, they don't make the storm vanish, but they keep themselves from losing direction. The human brain always acts based on what it believes. When you believe you are helpless, the brain stops looking for solutions. But when you believe there is still a chance, however small, the mind begins to mobilize creativity, persistence, and the strongest survival instincts. That is why optimism can double a person's strength. Not because it changes the outside world immediately, but because it changes the inner state where every decision and action is born. The strongest people are usually not those who have never despaired, but those who learn not to live forever in despair. They understand that life always has loss, betrayal, and failure, but they also understand that if they let the soul sink in bitterness, they will lose the last thing keeping them standing: belief. A tree turned toward the light will continue to grow, while a tree convinced it is dead will rot from the inside, even if the soil is still fertile. Pessimism makes a person shrink before life, while optimism makes them open up to possibilities. A pessimist sees the abyss and only thinks about falling. The optimist also sees that abyss, but they start looking for a way to build a bridge. The difference lies there. Strength is not always a thunderous roar. Sometimes it is just a very quiet decision that I will not give up. When you keep the light in your mind, even in the middle of the darkest days, you will be much stronger than what others see. Because ultimately, attitude towards life doesn't just decide how you see the world, it decides what the world will become inside you.